So I want to talk about the Connect AV post-market study. These are my disclosures. We've heard about the ellipsis. This is about the WaveLink endo-AVF device. And Wave iterative process from a 6 French device with upper limb access through to a 4 French device with wrist access or a combined access. It creates a fistula in the proximal forearm. The way that the data is developed has come on. Have we got a microphone still working? And this is a summary of some of that data, which shows good, this is all a bit sketchy, the voice. Let's see. Good outcomes over these periods, but the time period standardized and the microphone work if I move? So, this is an overall summary of the data to date, which shows quite a significant amount of data, which is not all standardized, as I say, but fairly consistent outcomes in terms of technical success, primary patency, and interventions. In terms of eligibility, 51 patients in this study from University of Alabama were eligible for a surgical fistula, 32% for a WaveLink fistula. But there is an element here, and I'll talk about this in a later talk about eligibility in different populations. In terms of comparison with surgical fistulas, the 2 studies out there, one from myself and one from Maudhurst, which show that patency is fairly comparable, but as from that previous slide, many patients are not suitable for a radiocephalic fistula, so this can be a first-line fistula that is comparable to surgical outcomes. So where are we at currently with data and evidence that we need for this? Well, Kadoki said more evidence is needed, more prospective research. The consensus panel said there's potential to revolutionize treatment, but we'll need more rigorous evaluation. And the FDA needs post-market post-market trials from both endo-AVFs. And this is where the Connect AV study comes in. This is a US study, it's a post-market surveillance study, BD WaveLink endo-AVF system, led by Eric Peden in the US. It's out there with the trial number, if you want to look this up. 280 patients to be recruited, of which 60 patients will be pre-dialysis, a maximum of 60 patients US. And the follow-up here is 2 years, which I think is really important. Patient criteria are fairly standard criteria, 2 millimeter vein, 2 millimeter artery, outflow greater than 2.5 millimeters in the communication with the target creation, and there's got to be that distance, but standard criteria. Exclusion criteria, again, the same as previous studies. I won't go into these in too much detail for time purposes. This is really important. There's a safety endpoint. The safety endpoint is device procedure-related SAEs, but also the efficacy primary endpoint, which I think these are absolute key, is functional cannulation success at 6 months. And I think there's a lot of talk about fistulas, there's a lot of talk about maturation and, ultrasound-guided maturation criteria. If you can't use a fistula, it's not a useful fistula, and this is the key point of this study. And primary patency at 1 month using standard definitions. And again, standard definitions in this field have not always been standard. So I think there's been some new definitions that have been invented that are fitted around endo-AVFs. That's important for the appropriate purposes, but here we're comparing these with other fistulas, and we need standard definitions. Lots of secondary endpoints, can't really go through these, but maturation, lots of the standard ones, but also lots of other things that we will get over 2 years. I want to just mention in the final minute about WAVE Global Update. This talk was about the WAVE study and the AV Connect. The WAVE study has now been discontinued and terminated. We can discuss this in the question session if people want to. The 3 PIs are here. The main reason for this is that the global pandemic hit WAVE very badly. Recruitment targets were not being met. The actual whole landscape of research at the moment in many of these studies, many of these sites that were being recruited has completely changed, research nurse staffing and things like that. It's just not possible to deliver this in the current climate. We need to have some benchmarks for these studies on endo-AVFs. I don't think we can just say, we make a definition and say that that's the right thing. And this is in a paper that can be referenced later on. So overall, in summary from Connect AV, ongoing prospective research adding to what's already there. This is what it's being asked for by regulators, by Kadoki. This is a large multi-center trial. This has got rigorous endpoints, and I think this is going to give us some very useful information about wavelength.